I did not vote in the SEC preseason poll. I don't understand the point of them doing it during media days when people are actually busy. Do it the week before. But if I had, Andy, I would have voted Ole Miss third, not LSU. Where do you stand on who the third best team in the league is?
Well, I think Ole Miss is the most exciting team in college football. It's the one I want to watch on TV every week. Mm-hmm. But I think LSU is the next choice.
Well, let's hit on. We'll start with LSU, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong. But let's get there. Max Johnson, starter by default, probably unfair, but it is what it is. Miles Brennan breaks his arm. Max Johnson, we saw a little bit of him last year. LSU was all over the map. They recovered late in the season, a lot better than a lot of people talked about. You talked about Keyshawn Boutte. I think everybody sort of tabbed him as the guy that is not a household name that will become a household name real early this season. But I don't think anybody in college football had a worse opening weekend last year than LSU. But what makes you confident this is the team that's the third place team in the SEC West?
Because they've admitted they screwed up the coordinator hires. They have worked to act completely opposite of that and hire a staff that is as close to 2019 as they can get.
Jake Pete's in the house. Yep.
Exactly. Friend of Joe Brady.
They had a sleepover one time. Yes.
He wears a button on his shirt.
Yeah.
And then I look at the way they ended the season, and I think this is probably, maybe I'm reading too much into two games, but the Florida game especially, I thought told you a lot about the core of this team. There were not many players available to play in that Florida game. They were in the 40s in terms of available players. They were smaller than an NFL roster at that point. And they just lost Eric Gilbert. You know, they'd lost Terrace Marshall earlier in the season to an opt-out. It felt like everything was going against them. It felt like, you know, that this is where Ed Orgeron loses it. And they go to Gainesville, and look, if Kyle Pitts plays in that game, Florida probably wins. But they went and they won the game when they shouldn't have had any business being in the game, given what they'd been the previous part of the season. And it tells me a lot. And then you get rid of the guys who were just hamstringing you schematically, and you bring in guys who are going to try to give you something schematically that we know works, that we've seen work. So that's the part they're going to put these people who kind of came together at the end of last season, got into we got mode. You add back in more depth on the defensive line. You add a tremendous freshman in Mason Smith. The offensive line is really old. It's completely veteran group. I have a hard time believing that they won't be a lot better than they were last year.
It's a compelling case. I'll give you that, Andy. I think I just believe a little bit more in the ingenuity of the Lane Kiffin offense. No Elijah Moore, obviously. Defensively, you can go either way. Obviously, 10 starters back. It's sort of that, well, do you want those starters back from a defense that struggled last year? But I don't think they can be worse. The offensive line situation concerns me.
These teams played last year, David, right?
I believe that they did.
Who won?
Well, if my sources are correct, I believe that the LSU Tigers won that game.
Okay.
Where was that game, though, Andy? Where was it? Do you recall?
At Tiger Stadium. So, yeah, no, it was not in that notorious snake pit known as Vaught Hemingway.
Hey, ask Nick Saban about Vaught Hemingway sometime. They've had some.
I was there, dude. I was there when they lost in Vaught Hemingway. They didn't lose because of Vaught Hemingway. They lost because of Dr. Bo Wallace, sir.
Listen. Never underestimate the magic of Ole Miss football. No, listen. I'm really curious to see what we have in year two. I just think when you bring back the best quarterback in the conference to start the season, I'm not sure he'll finish there, but he's the most accomplished guy to start, Matt Corral. You got obviously no Elijah Moore. You don't necessarily have that speed demon, but Jerry Neely I think is going to be solid. And again, if the defense can be not awful, Ole Miss, I don't think they're going to be a world beater, but they can knock on the door of 8 or 9 wins. I don't think that's out of the question.
So, all right, let me
I think they could slide above LSU.
Do you think, given the right circumstances, LSU could beat Alabama?
No, I don't.
Do you think, given the right circumstances, LSU could beat Texas A&M?
Yes.
Do you think, given the right circumstances, Ole Miss could beat Alabama?
Yes, I do. I do.
With how?
Outscoring them. I'm not saying they will, but I like here's the question that we're asking. If you let LSU and Alabama play 100 times and you let Ole Miss and Alabama play 100 times, I'm not sure either of those teams are winning double-digit games, but I think Ole Miss
can actually
wins more.
match up against them physically.
Yeah,
Ole
but
Miss
I don't think that's
can't.
going to be enough. That's
Ole
not
Miss
going to be
will
enough.
have to scheme them to death. The only chance they have is scheme and tempo.
Fair
LSU
enough.
can actually physically play with them.
I don't know that I fully buy that. They can be closer than most non-Texas, most teams. Texas A&M, I think, can go toe-to-toe with them. They'll be more physical than most teams. But I don't know that I buy that this LSU team, as constructed, can go head-to-head with Alabama physically. I think they still get beat up on both lines. Probably not as bad as Ole Miss would, but I think Ole Miss has a better chance of out-scheming them. I just don't think LSU beats Alabama. I think it's close between LSU and Ole Miss. I don't think they beat them as many times as Ole Miss can. I think the road is simpler.
I do think Ole Miss is going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat, and it might be.
I do too.
It might be LSU.
I think Ole Miss might also lose to someone they probably should not lose to.
That's where I was going.
The road game at Tennessee, I would be concerned if I'm Ole Miss. You're going to have an emotional spot. Tennessee's probably going to be a little bit better. You're Ole Miss on the road. It's in the middle of the season. What's your health situation? I'd be nervous.
What about Liberty? When Liberty shows up in November with Malik Willis?
That's going to be a 65-55. It's close, but not close.
That's Hugh Freeze coming back to Oxford. But all the NFL draft next year, Malik Willis versus Matt Corral. Let's do it.
I'm a big Malik Willis. I think Bruce is currently the ringleader of the Malik Willis fan club.
He drives the bandwagon.
But I feel like I could get second secretary maybe of the Malik Willis fan club. I love
recording
them
secretary of the fan club.
Yeah, exactly. Liberty is going to be a lot of fun, but I don't know that if they're playing a competent Ole Miss team, I don't know that they can win that game. That game is going to be super fun. But that's sort of the question: is how much better is Ole Miss in year two? The offensive line is the only thing that worries me about Ole Miss, because if that breaks down, you're going to be in problem land.